Hello everyone, we welcome you all to this week Tech Tuesday webinar on Manage IICS Environment Effectively Using IICS Assurance Service. Today's speaker is Ojas Srivastava, who's a Senior Application Specialist. Before we start the session, let's go through some of the housekeeping tips. The webinar is for 1 hour that includes 15 minutes Q&A. You can post your queries in Q&A box which will be answered at the end of the presentation. All participants will be muted during the presentation. The session will be recorded and it will be available on our InfoSupport YouTube channel and Success Portal where you can download the slide deck. Please feel free to submit your suggestion or feedback for this session in the post-webinar survey. The Success Portal is a micro-learning platform that offers free, unlimited learning to all the registered users. This feature-rich platform helps you learn and adapt to Informatica products better. The following are important links that you can go over later. This will help you in your product adoption journey with Informatica. Over to you, Ojas. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that introduction. So let's talk about Cloud Assurance Pack and how it helps us to simplify an IDMC org management. The role of Assurance Service is to help you make the most of Informatica Cloud Services by lowering risk, reducing cost, increasing visibility, and help you achieve your shared goals like a smooth software development lifecycle and overall application health check. The Assurance Service achieves this by using your IDMC org metadata, running it through an AI-assisted analysis, and combining it with Informatica expert recommendations and best practices custom curated for you. With this, we provide features such as upgrade readiness, which identifies potential impact of an upcoming IDMC upgrade release, with help with code promotion in SDLC, helping you integrate your components across multiple orgs, auditing and monitoring to oversee IDMC user activities, your application health and maintenance, and general governance and troubleshooting. So let's talk about IDMC upgrade readiness. We know that IDMC provides quarterly major upgrades along with some patches and standard upgrades where we release new features, enhancements, and often changes to existing features. In production orgs where these features are being used, there might be these changes might impact those assets and cause performance improvements, change in behaviors, and often regressions as well. In order to better prepare for these changes, Informatica Cloud Assurance provides a functionality called as feature impact to isolate assets with probable impacts and test the same in pre-release org before the IDMC upgrade release impacts our production orgs. So let's go and see a quick demo of the same. This is the landing page of Informatica Assurance Service, and you can see on the right-hand side there's a card which shows the feature impact functionality, pointing out to the all impacts and probable assets which are impacted in the upcoming release. If I click on View All, I'll get a detailed view of the same. In this detailed view, we have a summary here of all the assets which are impacted across and divided by task types and connected usage and even how recently we have run the same. There is an Analyze button to do a complete detailed analysis of our org and understand for each asset how exactly they are impacted. And I'll explain this in a minute. So let's take a particular impact as an example to understand this better. As you can see, this is an impact on Microsoft Azure Synapse SQL connector when it is being used as a target entity and the mapping task has pushed on optimization enabled, right? So we know that there is a code change happened to SQL connector of Microsoft Azure type, and it impacts when it is being used as target and PTO enabled. So we listed down all the tasks which are having Microsoft Azure Synapse SQL connector, using it as a target entity and have PTO enabled. So these are all the tasks which are using the code base or feature which has some changes. So there are probable impacts on these tasks and hence they should be tested. This is a broader, more assured range of testing that customers can use. And as you can see in my org, which is a demo org, there are 4 assets which are impacted or probably impacted. And so I can deploy them to a pre-release org and test them. But what if you have a huge org with a large number of assets which are impacted by this particular change, and you cannot really test all of them within the pre-release window, which is going to be the case with some production orgs. For these scenarios comes handy this Analyze button, which does a more detailed analysis and drill downs to the exact assets and tells the basis on why they might be impacted with a higher certainty. So as you can see, the detail of this impact says that not only your task has to be PDO enabled and using Microsoft Azure Synapse SQL connector as a target, but it also should have an expression or an aggregator transformation, and it should have the is spaces built-in function being used in this exact syntax for it to actually be impacted. And the impact is that if all these conditions satisfy, previously, before the release, the mapping would run, but without PTO. And after the release, the mapping would actually start failing. So this is a critical impact. And if I have too many assets which are using Azure Synapse SQL Connector as a target entity and PDO enabled, I cannot possibly test all of them, but I still need to identify the ones which are actually following all these conditions and make sure that I identify if they are actually failing with the upcoming release and address those issues accordingly before they hit my production come the IDMC upgrade release. For this purpose, when we switch to analysis view, we get the exact assets, and we also find out that these assets are actually having expressions, and those expressions actually have the is-space function being used in the format specified. So this drills down and identifies your assets on a much more detailed level and finds the exact conditions which make them a much higher and certain candidate for impact with the upcoming release. And thus, your load of testing in the pre-release environment reduces by a lot. So these are just two levels at which feature impact helps you with performing the tedious task of testing your organization for the upcoming release. And it reduces the load and automates all of these analysis, which otherwise you would have to do manually. So let's go to the next feature, code promotion and software development lifecycle. So we just saw one use case of deployment actually, where either after I have identified some assets that are impacted in my org or probably impacted in my org, I need to deploy them in pre-release where the upcoming release code is already available from Informatica, and I can run my assets there and see if they fail or if there is a behavior change that I need to address. To do this, I need to deploy all my assets and its dependencies to the target org, schedule them, prepare them, initialize their values, parameters, sequence generators, and all these things. Publish the task flows if so used, prepare the connections, test everything is working, validate all the assets, and then run them to monitor whether or not there is an impact. This is an entire task, and doing it for multiple tasks one by one is a very tedious code. This is where deployment flows from assurance service comes in handy. It helps us deploy assets and integrate them to the target org much more easily in one quick flow. So this covers multiple use cases. One use case was the one we saw of moving assets from production to pre-release during upgrade times. We can also have our development lifecycle integrated with deployment flows. So when you develop your mappings and mapping tasks and different assets in your dev org, you can promote them to QA, and from QA after testing, you can promote them to production. You can also create deployment flows and cover different assets which are belonging to the same business logic or the same business purpose, and create a saved flow with all the configurations in hand, and then deploy that particular business logic asset to multiple orgs just by running that deployment flow. You can also automate these deployment flows using Assurance's public APIs and integrate them with your CI/CD pipelines with Jenkins or any other flows that you have, which would automatically deploy them using the APIs. Lastly, we also have version control deployment to support customers who have linked their IDMC orgs with a VCS repository. And so they want to use the source of the GitHub or Okta or any other, sorry, not Okta, but any other version control repository as the source. So let's go and see a quick demo of deployment feature and how we can use it to deploy assets from one org to another. Obviously, when you use Assurance, you have to configure all the target orgs in a particular org that you want to deploy. You can configure a particular org with a native user or an SSO user based on your choice. You can then filter for different assets by basic properties like names, types, projects, and even properties like connection names or a particular connection type or task associated to a particular agents or runtime environment as well. Let's say I selected these few tasks. I selected my pre-release org. and I clicked on this deploy button here. We come to the screen where we start the target login. So we give a username and password credentials. This can be any username of this target org which has the import privileges so as to perform the deployment activity. Next, after doing the successful target login, we get to review the assets that we have selected for deployment and add more assets. So let's say if I want to add a task flow, I can filter by task type and select a task flow. If I want to deploy a particular user, I can select. If I want to deploy a particular process, CI process, I can select. If I want to deploy an app connection, I can select. On the next screen, I get to configure connection mappings, as in which source connections are going to be replaced by the corresponding target connections. If the names are same, we auto map it. If the names are different, then we have to map it manually. Otherwise, a similar name connection will be created in the target org, but the sensitive information like username and password have to be filled in manually. Same applies for app connections, projects and folders, and of course, runtime environment, where we select the runtime environments in the target org where these tasks are going to be run. In addition to these common configurations, deployment flow also provides you to reset sequences, task parameters, and schedule the tasks that you are deploying. So if you're deploying a task from your source org to your pre-release org, and in the source org, the task has ran 5 times, and suppose sequences come up to 5, but in the target org, you want to reset it to 5, you can choose to do so by selecting the reset option. Similarly, you can configure the input and in-out parameters of different tasks to use either the source org value or reset those parameters to their default values. Lastly, we can choose to schedule our tasks by matching schedule names, which means that if a task or task flow is associated with a schedule called S1 in the source org, and there is an S1 schedule also existing in the target org, automatically by selecting this option, your task flow will be associated to the S1 schedule of the target org. Instead of this, if you want, you can select manually for each of the tasks being deployed on what schedule they should run. After performing these configurations, you can also perform some post-validation check, like choosing to publish task flows, publish processes and guides, perform post-asset validations, where after the assets have been deployed to the target org, we perform validations on the documents and assets and all its dependent components. Finally, we also give you the option to perform connection tests on the assets, on the connections being used in the target org. So you can ensure that once the assets are deployed and validated, the connectivity to various data sources is also working, and thus your connections are ready to run. And with the schedule, that you can monitor their runtime activity and results. At the end of this, you have two options, which is one, to either save these deployment flows, which covers the use cases of creating deployment flow to use them in the CI/CD pipeline or creating deployment flow, so to deploy them to multiple orgs or multiple times as and when the development happens. For that, you just need to click on Save, give a name to the deployment flow, and hit Save. If you want, you can give more descriptions here. Or in the other case, if this is a just one-time activity, you want to quickly deploy this to a target org, you can just directly click Deploy, and it will deploy the flow as in immediately and will not save its information for further deployment. Once the deployment flow starts, you can monitor the activity and how it completes. A completed deployment flow report would look something like this, where you would have checkboxes on all the assets, as in what steps have been taken, they have been validated, they have been deployed. If this was a task flow, it would have been published and scheduled and so on and so forth. So that's the deployment feature of Assurance Service. Now let's talk about how Assurance Service helps us with auditing and monitoring. Assurance Service provides a plane graph assisted view of all the development activity being done in our org. Customers can use it to audit changes done to the assets and realize which users have made those changes, at what time, and what effect those changes had on the runtime activities of those assets. Customers can also use the PDO analysis feature in Assurance to identify which of their tasks, which are currently not PDO enabled, are eligible for the same, and what criteria should they follow to make that optimization happen. Finally, Assurance also provides visibility on tasks and their parameterized variables by allowing you an option to upload parameter files from various agents, diff them, and see their effects on tasks. Let's see a quick demo of the same. So this is Assurance's config management tab, and this is the activity tracker where we see a flame graph for all the changes and design time activities done over my org over the last 6 months. I can choose to look for specific assets and changes done on the same. These are all the updates done on the specific tasks, and I can see this specific update might have associated failure related to it. That means after this update was done, there was failures occurred on this runtime, on this task's runtime. I can find out details of the last updates happened before. The last 5 runs happened before the update, last 5 runs happened after the update, see the changes, or I can view the last 30 days runs of the same task. I can monitor what agent this task is running on, what connections it is using, what mappings it is using, and any other dependency that this task has. And if this was a version control task, I could also see what were the commit descriptions and which was the user who committed it, and even the commit hash. Moving on, we'll talk about the pushdown optimization analysis. But before that, I want to quickly mention that Assurance in the backend analyzes all our changes and design time activities of the org and generates recommendations which are custom curated for this org based on the analysis. So like my org has an agent where the recommendation for a specific property is valid, and so Assurance pops that up here. And we can click on the details to read the KBs and solutions to get more details about why this recommendation is applicable to us and maybe take benefit of the same. The pushdown optimization analysis feature allows us to select mapping tasks in our base which are not currently running on PDO and analyze them and find out whether or not they're eligible for pushdown optimization, and if so, what are the criteria that would make them eligible. So for example, this task is eligible for pushdown optimization, and these are the further criteria I need to take care of when I'm making a pushdown optimization enabled so that the runtime performance of this task can be increased. Finally, if there is an ineligible task, I can also view those, filter on the same, and identify what the reasons are for the tasks to not be eligible and maybe correct them or adjust the task accordingly so that it can be run in optimized mode. Lastly, we have the parameter files widget. As I said, we can have the option to upload different parameter files here, select which task we want to associate it, or automatically let them be associated by Assurance service on its own. And once that is done, we can diff different files, see what are the differences between them. If there were parameters added to one file which is not present in the other, we can see those things. And if there are value differences between them, we can see them. We can validate parameter files and so on and so forth. Now let's talk about application health and maintenance. Assurance service provides health check functionality to perform an org-wide analysis of all the assets. This analysis performs various system and user-defined validations and outputs any assets which are invalid by the defined standards. We can also use Assurance service for finding runtime anomalies in an IDMC org. This would help us find and mitigate risk with insightful details on probable cause of those anomalies. Assurance provides maintenance views into org connections and agents where users can choose to compare agents and sync the properties if need be. We can also use Assurance to perform inter-org comparison with other down-the-line orgs, like performing a comparison between dev and QA or QA and prod, and find out which assets are outdated in the upstream's orgs and deploy the same. Let's see a demo for these features now. So this is the health check widget of Assurance service. As you can see, when you land on this page, you can see the results of all the past health check runs and a graph showing how many assets failed or passed the validation standards defined. We have 3 different kinds of health check: the cloud data integration and cloud application integration, which are system-defined health check, where we have already provided validation rules. And then the third is my health check, where customers can define their own validation rules, which they want to apply on the assets in their org. Let's quickly see the results of one of the system-defined health checks on cloud data integration assets, where we can see the validation rules have different categories like performance and best practices and maintenance. And it shows how many rules of which category are present and how many assets of which type are failing or passing those validations. So let's say we have a validation rule where there shouldn't be any invalid tasks, and I can quickly see how many invalid tasks I have in my org and which those tasks are, and I can deal with them on why they are invalid or send this report across my teams. Let's quickly try to create a health check rule on our own. So when I have to create a rule, I give it a name. So let's say I give it an MCT validation rule. Which was the system-defined health check that we just saw. I can put it in, let's say, performance. I can give it a severity. And then this widget will suggest me on different different properties that I can apply rules on and such things. And then I can provide what kind of value I want and what kind of message I want to say. When I validate this, if there are any problems in my rule, the messages will show that and list the details of what could be going wrong. And now if I validate this, it will say the rule validation was successful. I can save this rule, and then I can choose to run my health check, which would run these rules on all the assets in my org. So that was system-defined health check and user-defined health check. Now let's go and look at runtime anomalies that are happening in my org and how Assurance identifies and displays the same to me. So this is the graph of all the anomaly trends that are happening over the last 12 months. So what Assurance does is it takes in the runtime data of how many tasks are running in my org, how much time each task takes on an average, what are the runtime patterns, what is the volume pattern, what is the data pattern, and analyzes those and looks for anomalies where the pattern has been broken for some reason or the other, and tries to find insights into what could be the probable causes. It shows a timeline of all the anomalies that have happened over the months and lists those anomalies here. So my task MS Insights has a duration anomaly where there was a 693% deviation to the average on the state, and I can look into more details if I want to. And it would tell me what was the anomalous run. It could show me the other runs where I can see the duration was less. And then I can go into deep identifying what was happening on that day in this task, which caused this anomaly, and I can generate a report and thus find risks or find issues that might be cropping up in my org before they become a big hit. Similarly, there could be some anomalies where it might be happening because of a specific change done on the task or a specific activity that was happening in my org on my agent, causing that issue. So like this particular anomaly happened because there were concurrent tasks running as opposed to other days when there were no anomalous runs and the task was the only one running on the agent, and which might be compromising CPU resources or RAM resources of the agent and thus causing a higher latency and generating the anomaly. I can see the error messages happening on this particular task over the last 7 days and 30 days leading up to the anomaly to find more reasons and what could be happening. Let's say an anomaly got caused immediately after I made some modification to the assets. The assurance service anomaly widget will also find those task changes and can link you to the previous widget we saw where the flame graph assisted view of all the updates was present. So we can link a particular update which caused an anomaly in the trend of a runtime of a task and then view this two together and inquire about it and identify some bad regressions added to the asset in the process of development. And this helps us mitigate risks again faster than it would happen in the normal course of time when the issues will happen repeatedly and we'll eventually realize it on the business end when it is affecting and all of those things are happening. So that's the two main features around health check, where we perform validations according to user and system-defined rules on the assets, so as to remove all kinds of design time standard violations and runtime anomaly observations, so that any anomalous events happening can be caught early, and the insights would help us resolve them early as well. So now let's talk about the maintenance features inside Assurance Service. The first widget is on secure agents. We can select any agent and compare it with other agents present in our org, either belonging to the same runtime or some other runtime environment. So let's select these two agents. We can select the target org if we want to select compare the agents of some other org, or else we can just select the agents inside this org and then click on compare. So the comparison results in comparing properties across all the services, not just the status wise, which means like whether the versions and service status is up or same or not, but even the property level comparison happens and it shows all the differences. So I created a random custom property and one agent had it and the other agent didn't have it. The network timeout period was different in the two agents. And we can see all the properties, but if you want, we can drill down to differences. This helps us in, and this comparison can happen even across different organizations. And this basically helps us in making sure that an agent in our one particular org, let's say a production org, is having the same properties that are required to run our assets on those agents as any agent present in our target org or in a pre-release org or some other org. Moving on, let's talk about naming conventions, features, and maintenance widget, where we can specify naming conventions on different assets in our organization. So whether there are folders, projects, tasks, task flows, or even secure agents and schedules and these kinds of things, we can specify a particular naming convention. If we want our folders to always start with a particular prefix or suffix or include a counter, and we can specify those naming conventions and we'll see all the assets which are not following these naming conventions in this widget here. And we can then enforce that report by sharing it across the teams. Third widget is to get a quick view of all the connections in our org, different types, different properties, and we can use it for different maintenance purposes. And finally, we have the org comparison feature in our maintenance, where we can specify a target org and compare specific projects or all the projects of our organization with the project in the target org. What this achieves is that all the assets present within this project will be selected and compared with all the assets present in the same project in the target org. And we'll get a report on what are the differences or what are the similarities between the two. So as you can see, this particular project had mappings and mapping tasks, and I get to see which mappings matched with the asset present in the target org and which mappings are missing in the target org. This gives me a good idea of what are the assets which are not yet deployed to the target org, and if this is an upstream comparison, I can choose to select and deploy them. It might also happen that the target org has a later version of the same asset, which I can find out using this column here, and it says that the current organization has the latest version and the target org does not have it. So I can there are some updates present in my current org which needs to be deployed to the target org, or else it could be the other way around and then I have to check the same as well. So this report is helpful to do an org-wide maintenance, or let's say cross-org maintenance on what version of assets are deployed where and which assets are missing in our upstream orgs. So that's the maintenance and health check demo. Now let's move on to the next feature of assurance. Finally, I would like to talk about governance and troubleshooting and how leveraging metadata assurance service helps with these two. Assurance service helps with IDMC org governance by performing inter-org mapping task comparisons to find code differences, analyzing assets to find and review user-defined custom code like session commands, user-defined functions, Java transformations. It allows you to bulk associate and dissociate tasks and task flows to a schedule. Can perform detailed analysis on CI assets and see under the hood what the properties and relationships of those assets are. And you can also use the AI-assisted analysis report that Assurance generates called Assurance Score to define the trend of your org and how well it is being maintained as per the best practices and recommendations of Informatica. Assurance finally also has a feature to help our modernization customers on their PC to IICS generation, where we validate PC workflows on whether or not they have the proper data connectivity and properties set so that they can be used in IICS well. Let's see a demo of these features that I just talked about. So to start with the demo of the governance features that I just discussed, let's start with mapping task comparison. For performing mapping task comparison between two tasks present in the same org, you can just select those tasks in the asset deployment page and click on the actions and use compare mapping task, and that would trigger the mapping task comparison between the selected tasks. If you want to compare a task present in this org with a task present in the target org, just select that specific task. Again, click the same action button, and you would be given an option to select the target org, provide the credentials, and then the next page you can select the task in the target org that you want to compare, and then the comparison would be triggered similarly. For now, let's just see the results of one of the comparisons that I've already triggered here. So these are all the differences that are present between the two mapping tasks that I compared. These are the mapping task level differences, and these are the mapping level differences. I can click on mapping to see the mapping level differences here. There are differences within the transformation, so I can click on those. And then I'll see what are the differences, what are the source transformations, what are the target transformations, and what are the differences between them. I can look at the fields. Obviously, these mapping tasks happen to be working on two different sources with two different schemas. So all the fields are different and they don't match at all. I can look at different advanced properties and session configurations and whether there are differences between the same. I can look at connection details and find out what are the connections being used by the two tasks, and accordingly select any two of them and perform a comparison as long as they are on the same type. And I can see the different properties present and what are the differences between them as well. So that's mapping task comparison. Coming back to the deployment page, let's talk about the next governance feature, which is custom component analysis. So the custom component analysis analyzes any number of selected assets, and you can click on Analyze Custom Components to perform this action. What it does is it generates a report which will identify all the custom components that you have that are being used in those assets. So let's see a custom component analysis report that I have already run. So these are the 11 assets or some random assets that I have selected, and I perform a custom component analysis on the same. It tells me what are the different assets present here, how many assets have a custom component present in them and how many don't. And it tells me what are the types of custom component I have. So when I say custom components, it includes custom queries, pre or post session commands, pre or post SQL queries, SQL overrides, user-defined functions, Java transformations. Basically, any type of logic or functionality that you introduce into your ETL logic customized way, in a customized way, basically, which is not present as part of an Informatica functionality. It's not an Informatica expression or a transformation or a property, but it's a custom query that you have written. And often it's hard to maintain them, hard to govern them, hard to modify them if you're not able to keep track of where all these properties are being used. So if you have a custom query on a certain table and it's present in number of mappings and tasks where they are being overridden and task flows where they are being provided as a parameter, and you suddenly happen to change, let's say, one column name. So it's very hard to know where all this particular property is being used unless you know the name of the table and you have a track of which all assets are probably using that table. Custom component analysis can help you with that. You can select a particular project and you can find out where which query is being used. You can analyze, you can view the query in detail. You can filter by the table name and so on and so forth. So that's custom component analysis. Moving on, let's talk about the last feature in this set, which is bulk schedule association. So the bulk schedule association is pretty direct as it sounds. You can select a number of tasks either by a particular project, a particular tag, or a particular activity, or any other kind of filter that you choose to, let's say, an agent name or a connection name. And you can choose to either schedule them or unschedule them in bulk. This is a property that was something available in our on-prem products and was missing from our cloud platform, and that's where Assurance Services is helping you use that functionality. It's especially helpful if you want to unschedule a large number of tasks in bulk, using the CDI IICS view, you will have to do it one by one for each of the assets, or you have to disable the entire schedule or blacklist it. But if there's only a subset of tasks associated with a particular schedule that you want to temporarily remove, you can use it. You can do that using Assurance. So we can just select a bunch of tasks and we can click on the actions and click on schedule or unschedule. When we click on schedule, the widget opens. And provides you the option of adding even more assets. You can click on the drop-down, select a particular schedule, click apply, and it will apply that to those particular assets that are selected to be scheduled. And on next, you can just review your decisions and then finally submit it, which would schedule all these assets in bulk. This is the job history page where after performing a particular schedule or mapping task comparison, asset deployment, or any of the other features provided in asset deployment, you can go and see the results, the reports generated, and you can keep a track of all the jobs that you have done inside Assurance and all the reports that you've generated using Assurance service. Finally, I wanted to briefly mention this Assurance Score feature, where Assurance Service applies all Informatica's best practices and recommendations against your org's metadata and maintenance practices, and provides you a trend of how well your org is being maintained and what are the areas where we can improve certain practices and what are the areas where we are doing good. And the trend helps you know the current state of your org and how well its maintenance is being done. In addition to the features demoed today, there are other features in Assurance Service as well to help our customers better manage their IDMC org. If you're interested in knowing more about Informatica's Assurance Service, you can use some of these links to access an Assurance's network blog, Assurance's datasheet, and Assurance's user guide. For any further questions around Assurance's pricing, purchase, or any further discussions, you can reach out to us at cloudassurance@informatica.com. Thank you.
Hi all, we have reached the Q&A part. Please post your question.
So, hello everyone, thanks for joining. I just wanted to quickly mention that the doc download link that is present in the PPT is not working as of now, but we correct it soon. It's just present in the last slide. Okay, so I'm seeing some of the questions. I'll start answering them verbally here. Does this require an additional license or bundle as part of existing IDMC platform? I would suggest you can talk more with your CSM, but yes, Cloud Assurance package is a separate package and requires an additional license called Informatica Assurance Service. Next question I see is, so MCD compare is part of assurance service, which gives granular comparison of mapping changes between orgs. That is correct. You can use MCD compare feature in assurance service to compare mappings across orgs or within the same org as well. And it gives granular details to the level of transformations, their different fields, and within the fields also different properties like precision, scale, data type, and all those things. So I see one question for partners. How can we test it? I'm assuming this is for like an OEM org. So you can create, you can use assurance license on the parent org and then use its features across the sub-orgs. And you can create the same level of ACS control that you provide on the platform that would apply an assurance service as well. If that was not really the answer, please tell me more details on what you mean for partners. Yes, that is correct. To access the service, you have to raise a shipping request and get the assurance license. Post that, the assurance service will be onboarded for your particular org. It's an additional package, just like any of the other services provided as part of IDMC platform. You get a specific additional license for assurance service, and then you can use it in that org.
Hi, Harshit. This is Uma here. I see your question. Can the health check be extended to on-prem, IDQM, DC, PC, like the operation insight? Right now, this health check is completely focused only on assurance service. And for health checks on the other platforms, it has to be a separate requirement that needs to be submitted to those respective on-prem instances.
Do we have any more questions? We don't see any more questions. Thank you, Ojas, for presenting today's webinar and Uma for joining as a panelist. We kindly request audience to take up survey and give us feedback once this webcast ends. Today's webinar will be available tomorrow on Success Portal under the Resources tab. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.